Life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. For Mike Henderson, that test came on a bitter winter morning by Lake Morrison. A single father struggling to make ends meet, Mike was walking home from his second job when he heard the screams. Through the morning mist, he saw her, a woman thrashing beneath the ice, her desperate hands clawing at the frozen surface. Without hesitation, he plunged into the deadly cold water, fighting against time and nature itself to save a stranger's life. As hypothermia set in, he managed to pull her to safety before collapsing. She whispered a thank you before the ambulance took her away. But who was this mysterious woman? And why would her identity change Mike's life forever? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights of Wilson Manufacturing buzzed overhead as Mike Henderson punched his time card for what felt like the 1,000th time. 10:00 p.m. The graveyard shift. His calloused fingers traced the worn edges of the card, each crease and fold a testament to years of faithful service. Third shift paid an extra $1.50 per hour. Money that went straight into Emma's college fund. Henderson, you're early again. Dave, the shift supervisor, called out from his office. You know Martha won't pay you for the extra minutes. Mike managed a tired smile. Just making sure I'm not late, Dave. You know how it goes. The factory floor hummed with the steady rhythm of machinery, a sound that had become as familiar to Mike as his own heartbeat. 12 years on the line had taught him every whir, every click, every mechanical breath of the packaging machines. He could diagnose a problem just by listening, a skill that had saved the company thousands in maintenance costs. Not that it had earned him more than a paper certificate of recognition hanging in the break room. At his workstation, Mike pulled out the small photo he kept in his wallet. Emma's school picture from last fall, her bright smile missing one front tooth. 12 years old now, but sometimes when he looked at her, he still saw that tiny baby he'd held in the hospital just hours before Sarah's heart gave out. He'd made a promise that day. Emma would have every opportunity life could offer, even if it meant working himself to the bone. The night shift at the factory wasn't enough, though, not with college tuition rising every year. That's why mornings meant his second job, cleaning offices at the Morton building downtown. Some of his co-workers at the factory thought he was crazy, working 16 hours a day. But they didn't understand. They hadn't seen Emma's face light up when she talked about becoming a doctor, hadn't watched her poring over science textbooks well above her grade level. "Dad, you don't have to work so hard," she'd told him just yesterday, her young face creased with worry that made her look too much like her mother. "I can get a job when I'm 16. He'd kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "You focus on those straight A's, kiddo. That's your job." The apartment they shared above Henderson's hardware store. No relation. Though Emma liked to pretend it was their family business, wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with temperamental appliances, and a living room that doubled as Emma's study space. But they'd made it home. Emma's science fair ribbons decorated one wall, while her carefully maintained honor roll certificates lined another. Between them hung a map marked with pins, every medical school in the country she dreamed of attending. Mike's shoulders ached as he worked the line, checking each package for defects before it moved down the conveyor belt. The repetitive motion was mind-numbing, but it left room for planning. Emma's birthday was coming up in 2 weeks. He'd been saving for months to buy her the microscope she'd been eyeing at the science supply store. $300. Steep, but watching her unwrap it would be worth every extra shift. A sharp pain shot through his lower back, a reminder of last week's double shift when Thompson called in sick. Mike stretched, glancing at the clock. 4:30 a.m. In 2 hours, he'd head to the Morton building, then home by noon to catch a few hours of sleep before Emma returned from school. Their daily routine was a carefully choreographed dance of timing and sacrifice, but they made it work. They always had. The worn time card slid into the punch clock again at 6 a.m., marking the end of another night shift. Outside, the winter air bit at his face as he walked the 6 blocks to his second job. The street lights were still on, their glow reflecting off the fresh snow that had fallen overnight. In the distance, Lake Morrison was a dark smudge against the pre-dawn sky. Mike pulled his threadbare coat tighter around his shoulders. Maybe next month he could afford a new one after Emma's microscope. For now, the old one would have to do. Like everything else in his life, it was a matter of priorities. And in Mike Henderson's world, every priority began and ended with giving his daughter the future she deserved. The morning that would change everything started like any other. Mike's bones ached as he finished mopping the last office in the Morton building, the sunrise painting the windows in shades of winter gold. His reflection in the glass looked ghostly, dark. Circles under his eyes, 2 days' worth of stubble on his chin. The night shift and morning cleaning had taken their usual toll. Mr. Henderson? He turned to find Amy, one of the early arriving accountants, standing in the doorway. She held out a steaming cup of coffee, her kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "You looked like you could use this." "You're an angel, Amy." He accepted the cup gratefully, the warmth seeping into his tired hands. "How's Tommy doing with his science project?" "Got an A-, thanks to Emma's tutoring." Amy beamed. "That daughter of yours is something special." Mike smiled, pride momentarily pushing away his exhaustion. Emma had spent 3 afternoons helping Tommy understand photosynthesis, refusing the money Amy had offered. "It's good practice for when I'm a doctor," she'd said with that determined look she got whenever she talked about her future. Back in the janitor's closet, Mike checked his phone. 3 text messages from Emma. "Made breakfast myself, Dad. Even washed the dishes. Left you a sandwich in the fridge for later. Love you. Ace that history test today." His throat tightened. Emma had been taking on more responsibility lately, trying to ease his burden. Just last week, he'd found her up at midnight, attempting to iron his work uniforms. The memory made his chest ache. She was growing up too fast, shouldering adult concerns when she should be focused on being 12. The walk home took him past Lake Morrison, where early morning ice fishermen were already setting up their gear. The lake had frozen early this year, though warning signs about thin ice still dotted the shoreline. Mike pulled out Emma's sandwich, peanut butter and banana, cut diagonally the way he'd always done for her. The gesture nearly brought tears to his eyes. His phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from Emma's science teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez. "Dear Mr. Henderson, I wanted to let you know that Emma's science fair project on cellular regeneration has been selected for the state competition in Springfield. This is a tremendous opportunity, though I understand there are costs involved for travel and accommodation." Mike leaned against a nearby tree, his heart doing a complicated dance of joy and anxiety. The state competition was a huge honor. Exactly. The kind of achievement that could catch the eye of college admissions officers. But Springfield was 3 hours away. Hotel rooms, meals, transportation. He did some quick mental math, his stomach sinking. The frigid morning air bit at his face as he resumed walking, his mind racing through possibilities. Maybe he could pick up some extra weekend shifts at the factory, or sell his old guitar. He hadn't played it since Sarah died anyway. Emma's college fund was strictly off limits, a promise he'd made to himself years ago. The lake stretched out beside him, its surface a mirror of the pale morning sky. In the distance, a lone figure skated lazy figures across the ice, their movements graceful against the winter landscape. Mike watched for a moment, remembering how Sarah used to love ice skating. They'd had their first date right here on Lake Morrison 16 years ago. She'd taught him to skate, laughing as he clung to her hands, both of them young and full of dreams. His eyes burned with fatigue as he checked his watch. If he hurried home now, he could get 4 hours of sleep before picking up Emma from school. Then help with homework, make dinner, catch a nap, and head back to the factory by 10. The endless cycle of his days stretched out before him. Each hour accounted for, each moment a step towards securing Emma's future. A sudden sound cut through. The morning quiet, high and desperate. Mike stopped, his tired brain taking a moment to process. There it was again, a scream coming from the direction of the lake. The lone skater was nowhere to be seen, but there was a dark spot on the ice, a break in the perfect white surface. His body moved before his mind could catch up, already running toward the sound. The warning sign flashed in his peripheral vision. Danger! Thin ice. But all he could think about was Emma's text from earlier. Love you! What happened next would rewrite the story of their lives forever. The ice crackled under Mike's feet as he ran. Later, he wouldn't remember kicking off his work boots or shrugging out of his coat. He would only remember the cold, sharp and absolute as he dove into the frozen lake. The shock of it stole his breath. Freezing water knifed through his clothes, turning his muscles to lead. For a horrible moment, he couldn't tell up from down in the murky darkness. Then he heard it again. A splash and gasp above him. He forced his eyes open against the sting of icy water. She was there, maybe 10 feet away, her dark hair spreading like ink in the water. Their eyes met through the crystalline chaos, hers wide with terror, already dulling from the cold. Mike pushed through the paralyzing chill, his former lifeguard training from high school, swimming up through the years. Don't panic, he'd learned. Panic kills faster than cold. Her struggles were weakening. Each movement became slower, more sluggish. Mike's lungs screamed for air as he reached her, his numb fingers closing around her wool coat. She was conscious enough to grip his shirt, but her eyes were starting to close. Not good. They had maybe minutes before hypothermia shut down their muscles completely. The surface was a broken jigsaw of ice above them. Mike kicked hard, pulling them both toward the ragged hole they'd fallen through. His head broke the surface with a desperate gasp. The woman's face lolled against his shoulder, pale as the snow around them. "Stay with me," he ground out through a chattering teeth. "What's your name?" Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Her elegant features were taking on a bluish tint that sent fresh fear through Mike's chest. He'd learned about the stages of hypothermia during his summer lifeguarding years. Blue lips meant they were running out of time. The ice kept breaking as he tried to pull them out, each attempt sending them back into the killing cold. His fingers couldn't grip, couldn't feel. The edge of the ice crumbled again and again. In the distance he heard shouting. Help was coming, but they needed to get out now. Mike thought of Emma, of her science fair project, of the sandwich she'd made him. The thought sent a surge of desperate strength through his frozen limbs. He shifted his grip on the woman, remembering. Another lesson from his lifeguard days. Sometimes you have to go under to get out. Deep breath, he managed to tell her. Her eyes flickered with understanding. He pulled them both under one last time, using the momentum to propel them upward at an angle. This time, when they surfaced, he was able to roll them onto solid ice. The woman coughed weakly beside him as voices grew closer. Mike tried to stand, to check if she was breathing properly, but his body wouldn't respond. The world tilted sideways, snow pressing against his cheek. Through dimming vision, he saw people running toward them. Someone was draping blankets over his shoulders, but he couldn't feel them. The woman was being lifted onto a stretcher, her expensive coat glittering with ice crystals. She turned her head toward him, lips moving. "Thank you," she mouthed before. The paramedics whisked her away. Sir, can you hear me?" A paramedic's face swam into view. "Can you tell me your name?" "Mike," he slurred. "Mike Henderson. My daughter, Emma. Someone needs to—" "We'll take care of everything, Mr. Henderson. You're going into shock. We need to get you to the hospital." As they lifted him onto another stretcher, Mike caught a glimpse of his ruined coat lying on the ice where he'd dropped it. Emma had saved for 3 months to buy him that coat last Christmas. The thought followed him into darkness as consciousness slipped away. How was he going to afford a new one? The last thing he heard was a police officer talking into his radio. Subject is stable. Female victim already en route to County General. Someone get me an ID on her. Looks like there's a wallet in her coat. And somebody call this guy's family. Mike tried to give them Emma's number, but the words wouldn't come. The morning sun blazed white above him, as bright and blinding as the future rushing up to meet him. Then everything faded to black, and Mike Henderson, single father, factory worker, and now reluctant hero, knew nothing more. The steady beep of hospital monitors pulled Mike back to consciousness. His body felt like it had been wrapped in lead blankets, every movement requiring monumental effort. Through the fog of medication, he heard a familiar voice. "Dad? The doctor? Says you can hear me now?" "Emma." He forced his heavy eyelids open to find her perched on the edge of his hospital bed, her face pale but composed. Mrs. Rodriguez, her science teacher, stood by the door in her winter coat. They must have picked Emma up from school. "Hey, kiddo," he managed, his voice rough. "Sorry about missing dinner." Emma's composure cracked. She threw her arms around him, careful of the IV lines. "You scared me so bad," she whispered against his shoulder. "But you saved her life, Dad. Everyone's talking about it." As if on cue, a news report played quietly on the wall-mounted TV. "Local father risks life to save drowning woman in Lake Morrison. The heroic rescue occurred early this morning when single father Michael Henderson..." Mike closed his eyes against a wave of dizziness. "Did they find out who she was?" "They won't release her name." Mrs. Rodriguez stepped forward. "Privacy concerns. But she's stable, thanks to you. The doctors said another minute under that ice." She left the sentence unfinished. A nurse entered, checking Mike's vitals with practiced efficiency. "Your temperature's almost back to normal, Mr. Henderson, though I must say you've caused quite a stir. There are reporters in the lobby asking for interviews." "Reporters?" Mike's chest tightened. "Emma, my shift's at the factory." "Dave from work called," Emma interrupted, pulling out a folded note. "He says take the week off, paid leave, and Mr. Morton sent this." She handed him the note. Through blurry vision, Mike read, "Take all the time you need. Your job will be waiting. What you did was extraordinary. James Morton. Relief, ward with anxiety. Paid leave would help, but a week of recovery meant no overtime, no extra shifts to save for Emma's science fair trip." The heart monitor betrayed his rising stress with quickening beeps. "Mr. Henderson," Dr. Phillips entered the room, chart in hand. "How are you feeling? Ready to go home?" Mike tried to sit up, but his muscles protested sharply. "Not so fast. Severe hypothermia isn't something we take lightly. You'll need at least 2 days here for observation." The doctor's expression softened at Mike's visible distress. "I understand you're worried about work, but pushing yourself too soon could lead to complications." Emma squeezed his hand. "Dad, please. Just rest." A light knock at the door interrupted them. A hospital administrator entered, holding a thick envelope. "Mr. Henderson, there's something you should know about your bill." Mike's heart monitor spiked again. Even with insurance, his copay would be substantial. "It's been taken care of, in full, including any follow-up care you might need." The room fell silent. "I don't understand," Mike said finally. "By who?" "The patient you saved," the administrator replied. "Her representative was quite insistent. They also left this." She handed Mike the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on expensive stationery. "Thank you doesn't begin to cover it. Please focus on getting better. V, just an initial. No full name, no further explanation." Mike stared at the elegant handwriting, remembering dark hair spreading in icy water, a whispered thank you before. Consciousness faded. "Dad?" Emma's voice brought him back. "Are you okay?" He managed to smile. "Yeah, kiddo, just tired." He looked at Dr. Phillips. 2 days, you said?" The doctor nodded. "Minimum, and then home rest for at least a week. No arguments." As the medical staff left, Emma pulled out her homework, settling into the chair beside his bed. Mrs. Rodriguez excused herself with a promise to return tomorrow. On TV, the news had moved on to weather reports, predicting more snow for the weekend. Mike watched, His daughter's study, her brow furrowed in concentration over her science textbook. The mysterious V's note lay on his bedside table, a puzzle for another day. Right now, his body was demanding sleep, the warmth of the hospital room a sharp contrast to the memory of ice water. "Emma?" he murmured, already drifting. Love. "You kiddo? Love you too, Dad." She looked up, smiling. "Even if you are totally going to upstage my science fair project with this whole heroic rescue thing." Mike fell asleep to the sound of her quiet laughter, unaware that in a private room, 3 floors above, a woman was asking her assistant to find out everything there was to know about Michael Henderson. A week after the rescue, Mike stood at his kitchen window, sipping coffee and watching the morning fog roll off Lake Morrison. His body still ached, but Dr. Phillips had finally cleared him to return to work tomorrow. The enforced rest had been both blessing and curse. Time with Emma, but also time to worry about the mounting bills, despite the mysterious payment of his hospital stay. The sound came without warning, the distinctive whop-whop-whop of helicopter blades cutting through the quiet morning air. Emma rushed to the window beside him. "Dad, look!" A sleek, black helicopter descended toward the empty lot behind Henderson's. "Hardware, its downdraft sending swirls of snow into the air." Below, an equally sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The whole scene felt surreal against their small town's modest backdrop. "Maybe it's the president," Emma joked, but her eyes were wide with curiosity. Mike watched as a woman emerged from the car, her dark hair caught in the helicopter's wind. Even from this distance, something about her was familiar, the graceful way she moved, the elegant cut of her coat. His chest tightened with recognition. The building's ancient buzzer sounded. Emma darted to answer it before Mike could stop her. "Henderson residence," she said into the intercom, trying to sound grown-up. "Hello?" a warm voice replied. "I'm looking for Michael Henderson. I believe he's expecting me." A pause. "Though he doesn't know it yet." Mike took the intercom from Emma's hand. "This is Mike Henderson." "Mr. Henderson, I think it's time we were properly introduced. May I come up?" Minutes later, a knock at their door revealed her in person. She was stunning in a way that made their modest apartment feel even smaller. Designer, clothes, perfect makeup, and eyes that held the same intensity they'd had beneath the ice. A man in a suit stood discreetly behind her carrying a briefcase. "Hello, Michael," she said softly. "I'm Victoria Cambridge." The name hit him like a physical force. Victoria Cambridge, CEO of Cambridge Tech Solutions, one of the largest technology companies in the country. He'd seen her on magazine covers, in news reports about technological innovation and corporate success. And he'd pulled her from Lake Morrison's freezing waters. "Please," he managed, "come in." Emma hovered nearby, practically vibrating with curiosity as Victoria entered their home. The woman's eyes took in everything. The worn furniture, Emma's science books spread across the coffee table, the wall of academic achievements, with genuine interest rather than judgment. "You must be Emma," Victoria smiled warmly. "I understand you're quite the scientist." Emma blushed. "I just like learning how things work." "The best kind of scientist." Victoria turned to Mike. "Mr. Henderson." "Mike, please." "Mike." She sat gracefully on their offered couch. "I owe you my life, and a proper thank you." The suited man opened his briefcase, but Victoria waved him off. "Later, James?" She leaned forward, her expression intense. "First, I want you both to understand something. That morning at the lake, I was taking a walk to clear my head. My company was facing a hostile takeover attempt. I was stressed, not thinking clearly. When the ice cracked..." She paused, composing herself. "Most people would have called 911 and hoped for the best. You dove in without hesitation. Anyone would have..." Mike started. "No," Victoria cut him off gently. "They wouldn't have. I've spent the past week thinking about those moments under the ice, about what it means to be truly saved, not just from drowning, but from the loneliness that drove me to walk alone that morning." She reached for the briefcase herself, withdrawing an envelope. "This is a token of my gratitude, a trust fund for Emma's education. Enough to cover any medical school in the country. Mike felt the room spin slightly. Miss Cambridge, I can't... Victoria, she corrected. And please, let me finish. She stood, moving to the window that overlooked the lake. That morning changed everything. Nearly dying has a way of clarifying what matters. And watching you with Emma this past week, yes, I had people keeping an eye on you both. I realized something else. She turned back to them, her professional poise softening into something more vulnerable. I realized I want to know the kind of man who would risk everything to save a stranger, if you'll let me. The morning sun broke through the fog outside, casting long rays across their small living room. In that light, Victoria Cambridge, billionaire CEO, corporate legend, looked surprisingly human. And in her eyes, Mike saw something that made his heart skip: hope. The magazine cover on Victoria's office wall told only part of the story. Victoria Cambridge, the woman who revolutionized AI. The real story, Mike was learning, ran much deeper. A week after her surprise visit, he found himself in her private office at Cambridge Tech's regional headquarters, trying to reconcile the powerful CEO with the woman who now sat across from him, sharing takeout Chinese food. Father was furious when I dropped out of Harvard, Victoria said, expertly wielding chopsticks. He'd planned my whole life: law school, marriage to a suitable hedge fund manager, board positions at all the right companies. She smiled wryly. Instead, I sold my car, used the money to start coding my first AI program, and lived on ramen noodles for 2 years. Mike watched her talk, struck by the passion in her voice. The corner office's floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the city skyline, but Victoria's focus was entirely on their conversation. "What made you choose AI?" he asked, genuinely curious. "I wanted to create something that could help people connect, really connect." She set down her chopsticks, expression turning thoughtful. "Everyone thought I was crazy. AI was barely more than science fiction then. But I had this vision of technology that could bridge human divides, make the world a little less lonely." Her words hit close to home. Mike thought of his own loneliness after Sarah's death, how he'd thrown himself into work and raising Emma to keep the emptiness at bay. "Did it work?" he asked softly. "Making the world less lonely." Victoria's smile faltered slightly. "The company succeeded beyond my wildest dreams. Cambridge Tech's AI systems are in everything from smartphones to hospitals now. But personally," she gestured at the vast office, the empire she'd built, "success can be its own kind of isolation." A gentle knock interrupted them. James, Victoria's assistant, appeared with a tablet. "I'm sorry, Ms. Cambridge, but the board is requesting an immediate video conference. The Jensen merger—" "Give me 5 minutes, James." After he left, Victoria turned back to Mike with an apologetic look. The price of success. Endless meetings. "I should go anyway." Mike started to rise. "Emma will be home from study group soon." "Wait." Victoria touched his arm lightly. "Come to dinner tomorrow night, both of you. There's someone I'd like you to meet." The someone turned out to be Dr. Catherine Chen, head of research at the city's largest teaching hospital, and an old friend of Victoria's from her Harvard days. As Emma peppered the doctor with questions about medical school over dinner in Victoria's penthouse, Mike watched Victoria watching them, seeing the same soft smile he often wore when observing his daughter's enthusiasm. "She reminds me of myself at that age," Victoria said later, after Emma had fallen asleep on the luxurious sofa. "That hunger to learn, to make a difference." They stood on Victoria's balcony, the city lights twinkling below like earthbound stars. The night air was cold, but neither seemed inclined to move inside. "You've made quite a difference yourself," Mike noted, thinking of the AI systems he'd learned were helping doctors diagnose diseases earlier, making healthcare more accessible. "Maybe." Victoria leaned against the railing, her shoulder brushing. But lately I've been wondering if I lost something along the way. Watching you with Emma, you have what matters most. Real connection. Love." The vulnerability in her voice made Mike turn to face her. In the dim light, with her guard down. She wasn't the CEO from the magazine cover. She was simply a woman who'd achieved everything she'd ever worked for, only to find success a poor substitute for genuine human connection. "The night you pulled me from the lake," she continued quietly, "was the first time in years someone had touched me without an agenda. No business deals, no social climbing, no carefully calculated networking, just human concern for another human." Mike thought about his own life, the endless shifts, the careful budgeting, the constant worry about Emma's future, but also the joy of his daughter's hugs, the pride in her achievements, the love that made every sacrifice worthwhile. "Sometimes the simplest connections are the most valuable," he said. Victoria turned to him, her eyes reflecting the city lights. "That's what I've been missing," she whispered. "The simple truth that sometimes saving a life means more than building an empire." Below them, a cold wind swept through the city streets. But up here, in this moment between worlds, neither felt the chill. They stood together in comfortable silence, two people from vastly different worlds, finding unexpected common ground in the space between their stories. Emma Henderson sat cross-legged on her bed, diary open in her lap. The pink journal, a gift from her dad on her 12th birthday, had become her confidant for processing the whirlwind changes of the past few weeks. "Dear Diary," she wrote, then paused, chewing her pen cap thoughtfully. "I think Dad's in love. Not that he'd admit it. He gets this funny look on his face whenever Victoria comes around. Kinda like how he looks in the old photos with Mom, but different too. Like he's scared and happy at the same time." She glanced at the framed photo on her nightstand, herself as a baby, cradled between her parents. Mom's smile, forever frozen in time, seemed to encourage her to continue writing. "Victoria's nothing like I expected a billionaire to be. Yesterday, she helped me with my science fair project, and she didn't just give answers. She asked questions that made me think harder, like Mom used to do, according to Dad. And she didn't mind when I got excited and talked about cellular biology. For an hour straight, a text message notification interrupted her writing. It was from Lily, her best friend. "OMG! Your dad and Victoria Cambridge are on the local news again." Emma scrambled for her laptop, pulling up the news website. Sure enough, there was a photo of her dad and Victoria leaving the coffee shop downtown. The headline read, "Local hero and tech mogul, a modern fairy tale." Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Jenny from school. "Is it true your dad's dating the richest woman in the state?" With a sigh, Emma returned to her diary. "Everyone at school keeps asking about Dad and Victoria. Some kids are weird about it, like Mason, who used to be nice, but now acts all fake friendly. But Lily just wants to know if Victoria's really as smart as people say." "She is, maybe even smarter." The sound of laughter drifted up from downstairs. Her, Dad and Victoria in the kitchen cooking dinner together. It had become a regular thing over the past week. Victoria had insisted on learning to make Sarah's old recipes, the ones Mike had kept alive all these years. "The weird thing is," Emma continued writing, "it doesn't feel weird anymore. Victoria fits here, even in our small apartment. She doesn't try to replace Mom. She asked me to tell her stories about Mom, actually, and she makes Dad smile. Like, really smile, not just the tired smile he gets after work." More giggles floated up from the kitchen, followed by the clatter of a dropped spoon and playful scolding. Emma smiled, adding, "I think Mom would like her. Victoria's teaching me about computers and AI, but she also helped me plant flowers in Mom's old garden box. She said sometimes the most advanced technology in the world can't compare to watching something grow." The diary entry was interrupted by a gentle knock. "Emma, dinner's ready," her dad called. "Coming," she quickly scribbled one last line. "Maybe fairy tales aren't just about poor girls becoming princesses. Maybe sometimes they're about lonely people finding each other and building something new, something that has room for memories and hopes all mixed together." In the kitchen, Emma found her dad and Victoria attempting to plate spaghetti and meatballs. Sarah's recipe, with what Victoria jokingly called corporate precision. Sauce was splattered on both their shirts, and the garlic bread was slightly burnt, but Emma couldn't remember the last time their small kitchen had felt so full of life. "Sorry. About the bread," Victoria said, running a hand through her slightly disheveled hair. "Your father claims I got distracted by a work call, but I maintain the timer was defective." "Right," Mike teased. "Blame the technology. Isn't that against your company policy?" Emma watched them, noting how they moved around each other in the kitchen, how Victoria automatically reached for the plates in their correct cabinet, how her dad's hand rested naturally on Victoria's shoulder as he passed behind her. Small things, comfortable things, that spoke of something growing as naturally as the flowers in Mom's garden box. "Hey, kiddo," her dad said, noticing her thoughtful expression. "Everything okay?" Emma smiled, thinking of her diary upstairs. "Yeah, Dad. Everything's really okay." Later that night, after Victoria had gone home and her dad had tucked her in, even though she insisted 12 was too old for tucking in, Emma added one final line to her diary. "P.S. I saw Victoria looking at rings on her phone when she thought, 'Nobody was watching. I'm not supposed to know that yet, but I think this fairy tale is just getting started.'" Victoria Cambridge had orchestrated billion-dollar mergers, launched revolutionary technology platforms, and faced down the toughest corporate boards in the country. But standing in Mike Henderson's modest living room, her hand nervously touching the ring box in her coat pocket, she felt more uncertain than she had in years. "Are you sure about the timing?" James had asked earlier that morning, watching her select the ring, a simple but elegant design that somehow reminded her of both, the ice that had brought them together and the warmth that had grown between them. "Life's too short for artificial timelines," she'd replied, thinking of those terrifying moments beneath the frozen lake. When you know, you know. Now, watching Mike move around his kitchen making coffee, he'd refused to let her buy him an expensive coffee maker, insisting his old one made the best cup in town. Victoria felt a certainty that all her business success had never given her. This was home. These were her people. "Emma's staying at Lily's tonight," Mike said, handing her a steaming mug. "Some big science project they're working on." Victoria smiled, knowing exactly what the project was. Emma and Lily had been her eager conspirators, helping to ensure. Tonight went perfectly. The ring box felt heavy in her pocket. "I thought we might take a walk," she suggested, trying to keep her voice casual. "By the lake." Mike's eyes softened. They often walked by Lake Morrison now, their private joke being that it had played matchmaker, albeit in a rather dramatic fashion. He grabbed his coat, a new one Victoria had finally convinced him to accept after weeks of gentle insistence. Evening was clear and cold, stars beginning to peek through the darkening sky. They walked in comfortable silence, their breath forming small clouds in the winter air. Victoria led them to a specific spot, where a new bench had been installed just yesterday. "That's new," Mike commented, then paused as he read the small plaque, "where every ending is a beginning." His eyes met hers, questioning. Victoria took both his hands in hers. "Mike Henderson, when I walked out onto this lake 2 months ago, I was one of the loneliest people in the world. I had everything money could buy and nothing that truly mattered." She squeezed his hands gently. "Then you dove into freezing water to save a stranger's life, and in doing so, you saved much more than that. You saved me from a life without real love, without genuine connection." Mike's eyes widened as she reached into her pocket, producing the ring box. "Victoria, please, let me finish." She took a deep breath. "I've spent weeks trying to find the perfect words, the perfect moment. But I realized something. Our story began with an imperfect moment that turned out to be perfectly right. So here I am, probably breaking a dozen rules of traditional romance, asking you to marry me." She opened the box, revealing the ring. "I'm not asking you to leave your job. I know how much it means to you, your work ethic, your independence. I'm not asking you to change who you are. I'm asking if I can be part of your family officially, if I can help Emma achieve her dreams while respecting Sarah's memory. If I can wake up every morning to your old coffee maker and your daughter's science experiments and your beautiful, genuine heart. Tears glinted in Mike's eyes, catching the starlight. You know Emma put you up to this, don't you? He said softly. She's been dropping hints about ring shopping for weeks, Victoria laughed, her own eyes wet. She might have been my co-conspirator. That daughter of yours is going to revolutionize medicine someday, mark my words. She grew serious again. But this isn't about Emma or my company or anything else. This is about us. About how you've taught me that true wealth isn't in bank accounts or corporate acquisitions. It's in morning coffee and burnt garlic bread, and love that dives into frozen lakes without hesitation. Mike reached out, touching her face gently. You know this will be complicated. The media, your board of directors. Let them talk, Victoria said firmly. I've spent my whole life building a company that connects people through technology, but you showed me what real connection means. So, Michael Henderson, will you marry me? Will you let me be part of your story? Mike looked at the ring, then at the lake where their story began, then back at Victoria. In her eyes he saw not the powerful CEO or the wealthy heiress, but simply the woman who had brought laughter back into his kitchen and joy back into his life. On one condition, he said finally. Victoria held her breath. Anything. We keep the old coffee maker. Her laughter rang out across the lake, pure and joyful. Deal. As Mike pulled her into a kiss, snow began to fall softly around them. On the new bench, the plaque caught the moonlight, where every ending is a beginning, and in Victoria's pocket her phone buzzed with an incoming text from Emma. Did he say yes? The morning after their engagement, Mike's old coffee maker sputtered to life as usual, but everything else had changed. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since dawn. Reporters, old friends, distant relatives who'd suddenly remembered his existence. Outside their apartment, 3 news vans waited like patient predators. Tech titan to wed local hero, screamed the headlines. Frozen lake leads to heated romance, declared another, making both Mike and Victoria groan over their coffee. I'm sorry about this, Victoria said, watching a photographer attempt to get a shot through their kitchen window. I should have anticipated. Don't. Mike squeezed her hand. We knew this was coming, though I admit I didn't expect good morning. America to call at 5 a.m. Emma burst into the kitchen, still in her pajamas, waving her phone. Dad, Victoria, you're trending on Twitter, and Lisa Chen from Homeroom says her mom wants to know if you're still going to help at the school bake sale next week. Victoria, dressed in yesterday's clothes and sporting adorably mussed hair, laughed. The bake sale might be a bit more crowded than usual. As if on cue, James appeared at their door, somehow impeccably dressed despite the early hour. Ms. Cambridge, the board is requesting an emergency meeting, and the governor just called to offer congratulations and to remind you about the Technology Initiative funding vote next month. Mike watched Victoria shift seamlessly into CEO mode, her spine straightening, even as her hand remained warm in his. Schedule the board for 9, send the governor a thank you and assure him the wedding won't affect any business decisions. And, James, her professional mask softened. Make sure everyone knows that any press questions about Mike or Emma go through you first. After James left, Mike started gathering dishes, his factory worker's habits automatically kicking in. Victoria stopped him with a gentle touch. Leave them. Come with me to the board meeting, he blinked. Me? I don't know anything about corporate governance or... You know about authenticity and real values. Besides, her eyes twinkled, they should meet the man who's going to be making their CEO's coffee every morning. The Cambridge Tech Solutions boardroom felt like another planet compared to Mike's break room at the factory. Leather chairs, glass walls, a view that made his apartment look like a dollhouse. The board members' expressions ranged from carefully neutral to openly skeptical. Ms. Cambridge, Gerald Morton, the eldest board member, began. While we, of course, extend our Congratulations. There are concerns about how this personal development might impact shareholder confidence. Victoria's hand found Mike's under the table. Actually, Gerald, I invited Mike here to share some insights about authentic human connection. You know, the foundation of our AI development philosophy. Mike felt 12 pairs of eyes turned to him. He thought about running, about acknowledging he didn't belong in this world of power suits and stock options. Then he felt Victoria's quiet strength beside him, saw her subtle nod of encouragement. When I pulled Victoria from that lake, he began, his voice steadier than he expected. I didn't know she was a CEO. I didn't know about Cambridge Tech or stock prices or board meetings. I just knew someone needed help. He met Gerald's eyes. Isn't that what your company's about? Using technology to help people connect, to make the world a little less cold? A younger board member nodded slowly. Our latest AI empathy algorithms are based on genuine human interaction, Victoria finished. Something Mike understands better than any corporate consultant I've ever hired. Later, walking out of the building, Victoria hugged him tightly. You were amazing in there, though I think you shocked Gerald into silence when you offered to bring him a cup of your famous coffee. Mike grinned. Well, your board needs to understand what they're getting. I'm still working my shifts at the factory, still making coffee in that old machine, still helping at school bake sales. I wouldn't have it any other way. Victoria's phone buzzed. Oh no! What? Emma texted. Apparently, the local news is doing a feature on the coffee maker that captured a CEO's heart. They laughed together, there on the sidewalk between their two worlds. Behind them, Cambridge Tech Solutions reached toward the sky, while somewhere, across town, their apartment waited, with its worn furniture and science fair projects and perfectly brewed coffee. You know, Victoria said thoughtfully, maybe we're not just merging two lives. Maybe we're showing people that love doesn't care about corporate hierarchies or social expectations. Maybe, Mike agreed, thinking of the morning's headlines. Or maybe we're just making one hell of a cup of coffee. Victoria's answering smile was brighter than any boardroom light. Speaking of which, want to scandalize the paparazzi by getting breakfast at that little diner you love? The one with the $3 coffee and infinite refills? That's the one. After all, she winked, I have to keep up my new reputation as a coffee connoisseur. The box had sat untouched in Mike's closet for 12 years. Now, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, he found himself pulling it out while Victoria and Emma sat cross-legged on his bedroom floor. Inside, Sarah's life was carefully preserved. Photo, albums, letters, her favorite scarf still holding a trace of her perfume. You have her smile, Victoria said softly to Emma, studying a photo of Sarah at her medical school graduation. That same determination. Emma traced her mother's face in the picture. Dad says she would quiz me on body parts when I was a baby, called me her little resident. Mike pulled out a worn envelope, hands trembling slightly. She wrote letters, one for each of Emma's birthdays until 18. This one's for 12. He'd been dreading this moment since Emma's birthday had approached, unsure how to honor Sarah's wishes while embracing their new future. Victoria started to stand. I should give you privacy for— Stay, Mike and Emma said simultaneously. Emma took the letter, looking at Victoria. Mum would want you here. She wrote in my 10-year letter that love multiplies. It doesn't divide. As Emma read her mother's words aloud, Victoria's hand found Mike's. The letter was everything they'd expected from Sarah. Wise, funny, full of medical puns and motherly advice. But then Emma's voice caught on an unexpected passage. And if by now your father has finally learned to let love back into his heart, know that this is what I've prayed for. The right person will understand that loving me and loving them aren't opposing forces. They're part of the same big heart that makes your father who he is. Mike wiped his eyes, feeling Victoria's grip tighten. She'd been so careful these past months, always ensuring Sarah's photos stayed in their places, asking Emma stories about her mother, keeping the garden box blooming with Sarah's favorite flowers. I should show you something too, Victoria said after a moment. She pulled out her phone, scrolling to a saved photo. This is Thomas. The picture showed a younger Victoria with a man about Mike's age, both laughing on a beach. My fiancé from 10 years ago. He was a teacher at an inner-city school, passionate about education technology. He's actually the reason I shifted Cambridge Tech's focus toward learning applications. What happened? Emma asked, then quickly added, if you want to tell us. Victoria's smile held old pain, brain cancer. He died 6 months before the wedding. After that, I threw myself into work, built the company into what it is today. But I kept our dream alive through the Thomas Parker Education Initiative, providing technology to underfunded schools. Mike had seen the initiative mentioned in articles about Victoria, but had never known the personal story behind it. That's why you connected so quickly with Emma's love of learning. Victoria nodded. Thomas used to say that knowledge was the greatest gift we could give the next generation. She looked at Sarah's photo again. Just like Sarah wanted to heal people. Emma gathered the photos spread around them, creating a careful arrangement. So I have 2 guardian angels watching over me, a doctor and a teacher, plus 2 people right here who love you more than anything, Mike added, pulling her close. Victoria watched them, then reached for her phone again. I've been wanting to discuss something with you both. The Cambridge Tech Foundation is launching a new medical research fellowship. We'd like to call it the Sarah Henderson Memorial Fellowship for Advanced Medicine. Full funding for promising medical students who share her passion for patient care. Mike stared at her, speechless. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Only if you're comfortable with it, Victoria added quickly. I just thought, it's perfect, Mike managed. Sarah would love knowing she's still helping future doctors. They spent the afternoon going through the box, Victoria adding her own stories between Sarah's memories. Somewhere between laughter and tears, Mike realized that Sarah had been right. Love didn't divide, it multiplied. His heart hadn't split its affection between past and present. It had grown larger to hold both. Later, after Emma had fallen asleep, surrounded by photos, Victoria helped Mike return the box to its place of honor in the closet. Thank you, he said softly, for making it safe to remember. Thank you for making it safe to begin again, she replied, carefully straightening Sarah's scarf in the box. For showing me that real love isn't about replacing or competing. It's about growing together, scars and all. Mike closed the closet door gently, knowing the memories inside were no longer locked away, but woven into the fabric of their expanding family. Outside, snow began to fall, and somewhere between Sarah's past and Victoria's future, their present felt perfectly, completely whole. The attack came during Cambridge Tech's quarterly earnings call. Victoria had been expecting it, had prepared for it, but the actual moment still felt like a blade between her ribs. Ms. Cambridge, Theodore Grant, a prominent shareholder, spoke with calculated precision. While the company's performance remains strong, there are concerns about your recent personal decisions. Specifically, your engagement to an unnamed factory worker, Michael Henderson, Victoria corrected firmly, her voice carrying clearly through the conference room's sophisticated audio system. And I fail to see how my personal life affects our 18% year-over-year growth. Mike, listening to the call from his own lunch break at the factory, felt his co-workers gather supportively around his phone. Dave, his supervisor, squeezed his shoulder. The board's concern, Grant continued, is about decision-making judgment. Your fiancé has no business experience, no education beyond high school, and now stands to gain significant control over shareholder interests through marriage. Victoria's response was ice-cold. Mr. Grant, let me be clear. Michael Henderson displayed better judgment in one moment at Lake Morrison than many corporate executives show in their entire careers. He risked his life to save a stranger with no expectation of reward or recognition. If that's not the kind of ethical decision-making we want associated with Cambridge Tech, then perhaps we need to revisit our company's core values. A murmur ran through both the conference room and Mike's break room. Dave whispered, "That's your girl, Henderson." But Grant wasn't finished. "There are rumors, Ms. Cambridge, that this entire relationship is a publicity stunt, a calculated move to humanize your image after last year's AI privacy concerns. Sources suggest Mr. Henderson was actually compensated to stage the rescue." The sound of Victoria's chair scraping back cut through the audio. "This call is over. James, prepare. A press release. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning." Mike's co-workers erupted in supportive outrage, but he barely heard them. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Meet me at our bench? Now?" 20 minutes later, he found her sitting by Lake Morrison, her elegant business suit incongruous against the weathered wood. She looked up as he approached, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry," she began, but Mike sat beside her, taking her hand. "Don't apologize for other people's prejudice. They're trying to paint you as an opportunist, trying to destroy everything you've built with Emma through hard work and integrity." She gripped his hand tighter. "I won't let them." Mike looked out over the lake, its surface glittering in the afternoon sun. "You know what I learned working factory floors for 12 years? People who judge others by their bank accounts or diplomas usually do it because they're afraid. Afraid of being seen for who they really are, stripped of all the trappings." He turned to her. "You saw me, Victoria. Not my job or my apartment or my lack of degrees, just me. That's what scares them." Victoria wiped her eyes, leaving a slight smudge of expensive mascara. "The board meeting tomorrow. I need you there." "Victoria, not to defend yourself. You have nothing to prove to them. I need you there because when I tell them I'm restructuring the company's leadership to focus on ethical AI development and expanding the Thomas Parker Initiative, I want you beside me. The man who taught me that true value isn't measured in stock prices." Mike felt the weight of what she was risking, her position, her company, her life's work. "Are you sure?" She laughed suddenly, the sound bright against the winter air. "Do you know what our AI's core programming is based on? Human empathy, the ability to recognize and respond to genuine emotion. Everything I've built rests on the belief that authentic human connection matters more than artificial constructs." She squeezed his hand. "You're not a liability to Cambridge Tech, Mike. You're proof that our fundamental philosophy works." From across the lake, a photographer's telephoto lens captured their conversation. Tomorrow, the image would grace business websites worldwide. The tech CEO and the factory worker, holding hands on a weathered bench. Their contrasting worlds, merging in the winter sunlight. But for now, they sat together, letting the peace of Lake Morrison wash over them. Mike's phone buzzed, a text from Emma. "Dad, Victoria's trending again, but this time all the comments are defending you both. Even my science teacher posted about it. The love wins, masked Cambridge Tech values." Victoria read the message over his shoulder and smiled. "Ready to face the board tomorrow?" Mike stood, pulling her up with him. "Ready to face anything, though." "What?" "Think we could stop by the factory first? Dave and the guys want to give you their own vote of confidence. Warning, it might involve coffee from the break room vending machine." Victoria's laughter echoed across the lake, drowning out the click of distant cameras. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." Martha's Diner had been serving the same breakfast special for 30 years, and its regulars liked it that way, which was why the sight of a Bentley parked outside caused such a stir that morning. Inside, Victoria sat in Mike's usual booth, wearing jeans and one of his old factory sweatshirts, while the regular breakfast crowd tried to pretend they weren't staring. "Your usual, Mike?" Martha herself approached, coffee pot in hand, before noticing Victoria. "Oh, Ms. Cambridge, we saw you on TV yesterday. That speech you gave about small-town values was something else." Victoria smiled warmly. "Please, it's just Victoria, and I hear your coffee rivals Mike's." "Don't you believe it?" Joe called from the counter, where he'd been having breakfast at 7 a.m. sharp for 2 decades. Mike's coffee is the only thing that got us through that blizzard of 19 when we were stuck at the factory for 2 days. The diner's atmosphere softened, familiar stories replacing awkward silence. Victoria listened intently as the regulars shared tales of Mike's quiet acts of kindness over the years, staying late to fix Martha's ancient dishwasher, teaching Joe's son to change a tire, organizing factory fundraisers for families in need. "You and no," Martha said, refilling their cups. "We were worried at first. Thought we might lose you both to the big city." "Never," Mike and Victoria said simultaneously, then laughed. "The Cambridge Tech Board actually suggested I relocate to Manhattan," Victoria admitted. "I told them Lake Morrison has better coffee." The bell above the door chimed as Emma burst in, still wearing her soccer uniform. "Dad! Victoria! Practice!" Got cancelled because everyone was talking about Principal Turner's editorial in the town paper. Mike grabbed the local newspaper from the next booth. There, on the opinion page, was a lengthy piece titled "What Victoria Cambridge Could Learn from Our Town and What We Could Learn from Her." "Read it out loud," Martha urged, pulling up a chair. Mike cleared his throat. When Victoria Cambridge first arrived in our town via helicopter, many of us assumed we were watching the beginning of a fairy tale, the wealthy CEO swooping in to transform our local hero's life. We were right about the fairy tale part, but wrong about the transformation. Over these past months, we've watched Ms. Cambridge become part of our community, not by changing it, but by embracing it. The article went on to describe how Victoria had quietly integrated into town life, attending school board meetings, joining the Library Foundation, even helping coach Emma's science club. But it also noted how she'd brought positive changes, updating the school's computer lab, establishing a tech training program at the community college, creating remote work opportunities that kept young people from having to leave town for jobs. Perhaps the real fairy tale, Mike continued reading, is not about a CEO falling for a factory worker, but about two people showing us that true value isn't found in bank accounts or boardrooms, but in community, commitment, and a really good cup of coffee. Victoria wiped her eyes as Mike finished. "Principal Turner sent me an advance copy," Emma admitted. "The whole school's talking about it. Even Mason's mom, who was weird about everything at first, shared it on Facebook." "Speaking of sharing," Martha interjected, "when are you two finally going to tell everyone about the wedding plans? The ladies' auxiliary is dying to know." Mike and Victoria exchanged glances. They'd been keeping the details private, trying to avoid media attention. But looking around the diner at these people who'd been Mike's extended family for years and had gradually become Victoria's too, it felt wrong to exclude them. "Actually," Victoria said, pulling out her tablet, "we could use some local advice. We're thinking of having it right here in town." The next hour turned into an impromptu wedding planning session. Martha offered to cater the rehearsal dinner. No fancy stuff, just good food made with love. Joe, who served as town council president, suggested the restored bandstand in the park for the ceremony. Emma excitedly showed everyone the bridesmaid dress designs she'd been secretly sketching. "But what about all your fancy business associates?" someone asked Victoria. "Won't they expect something more elaborate?" Victoria looked around the diner, at the worn vinyl booths and faded photographs on the walls, at Mike's friends who'd become her friends, at the community that had welcomed her, not because of her wealth or status, but simply because she loved one of their own. "Let them come see what real wealth looks like," she said softly. "Let them see what I found here that all my money couldn't buy." Mike squeezed her hand under the table as Martha brought them fresh coffee in chipped ceramic mugs. Outside, a few photographers had gathered, drawn by the Bentley. Inside, surrounded by the warm chatter of breakfast regulars planning their wedding, Mike and Victoria simply smiled. Let the world look. This was who they were. Coffee, community, and all. The headline hit like a thunderbolt. Cambridge Tech scandal. CEO's fiancé accused of corporate espionage. Mike saw it first on his phone during his break at the factory, moments before Victoria's desperate call. "Mike, don't read the news. Please. I'm on my way." But it was too late. The story was everywhere. Allegations that Mike had been feeding privileged Cambridge Tech information to a rival company, complete with doctored emails and fabricated bank transfers. The evidence suggested the entire relationship had been a long con, orchestrated by their biggest competitor. Dave appeared at Mike's workstation, face grave. "Go home, Henderson. Take care of this. We've got your back." By the time Mike reached their apartment, Emma was already home from school, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, it's not true. Everyone knows it's not true." Victoria arrived moments later, James running to keep up with her stride. Her face was pale but composed, CEO mask firmly in place. Only her trembling hands betrayed her distress as she pulled Mike into a fierce embrace. "Theodore Grant," she said into his shoulder. "He's behind this. He's working with Netcore to orchestrate a hostile takeover. They're using you to destroy my credibility." "Ms. Cambridge," James interrupted gently. "The board is demanding an emergency session. They're talking about a temporary leadership transition until this is resolved." Mike felt Victoria stiffen in his arms. He knew that look. She was preparing for battle, ready to fight for everything she'd built. But this time, he couldn't let her. "I need to leave," he said quietly. "What?" "No, Mike, we'll fight this. They're using me to destroy you." He stepped back, though it felt like tearing his own heart out. "Your company, your life's work, everything you've built. I won't be the reason it all burns down." "Dad, no." "Emma." You grabbed his arm. "Victoria, tell him he's wrong." But Victoria was staring at Mike with dawning horror. "You're going to sacrifice our relationship to save my company. Just like that? Not just the company." Mike's voice cracked. "The Sarah Henderson Fellowship, the Thomas Parker Initiative. All those schools and hospitals depending on Cambridge Tech's AI systems. I'm one person. I can't let my presence destroy everything you've created that helps people." "You're not just one person," Victoria's CEO mask shattered. "You're the man I love. You're Emma's father. You're the heart of everything I want to build." "Ms. Cambridge," James interrupted again, more urgently. "The board is threatening to call a shareholder vote. We need to respond now." Mike had seen that look in Victoria's eyes before, the same determination she'd shown in the boardroom, fighting for their relationship. But this time, he couldn't let her fight. This time, love meant walking away. He picked up his old work bag, the same one he'd carried every day to the factory. "Emma, get your homework done. I'll call you later." "Mike, please." Victoria's voice broke. "We can prove the documents are fake. We can—" "How long will that take? Days, weeks, while your company's stock plummets and your board turns against you?" He forced himself to meet her eyes. "I jumped into that lake without thinking about consequences. This time, I have to think about what's best for everyone. Everyone except us," Victoria whispered. Emma was sobbing now, clutching Victoria's hand. The sight nearly broke Mike's resolve. But he remembered Victoria, telling him about the children whose lives were changed by the Thomas Parker Initiative, the medical breakthroughs funded by Cambridge Tech's research grants. Sometimes, love meant sacrifice. He pulled out an envelope he'd written during his break after seeing the news. "My resignation from the factory. Dave can't be associated with this either." He placed his key to Victoria's penthouse beside it. "I'll be at Joe's hunting cabin until this blows over. No phone, no contact. Give them nothing to use against you." "Dad." "Please!" Emma's voice was desperate. "We're supposed to be a family." The word family hit him like a physical blow. He looked at Victoria, saw the same pain reflected in her eyes. "Sometimes protecting our family means making impossible choices." Victoria stepped forward, her voice steady despite her tears. "If you walk out that door, Mike Henderson, you're making the choice for all of us, and you're wrong about what matters most." He hesitated at the threshold, memorizing their faces. His daughter, strong and brilliant like her mother. Victoria, who had shown him that love could bloom again in the depths of winter. Everything he wanted, everything he had to give up to protect. "I love you both," he said softly. "That's why I have to go." The door closed behind him with a quiet click. In the empty hallway, Mike Henderson, local hero, loving father, and the man who had captured a CEO's heart, let his tears fall at last. Sometimes, he thought, the greatest acts of love felt exactly like betrayal. Joe's hunting cabin sat deep in the woods, an hour's drive from Lake Morrison. Mike spent the first day in silence, watching snow fall through the window, his phone turned off and stored in a drawer. The second day, he split wood until his muscles screamed, trying to exhaust himself into numbness. By the third day, the local news had moved on to a new headline. Cambridge Tech CEO announces temporary leave of absence. He found the newspaper on Joe's porch, delivered faithfully despite the remote location. Victoria's corporate headshot stared back at him, her eyes holding none of the warmth he'd come to know. The article quoted a Cambridge Tech spokesperson. "Ms. Cambridge will be taking a brief personal leave to address recent allegations. Leadership will temporarily transfer to the board of directors." Mike crumpled the paper, then smoothed it out again, unable to stop himself from reading every word. Between the lines of corporate speak, he could feel Victoria's pain, her rage at being forced to step back from her own company. He'd done this to her, all because he'd fallen in love with someone whose life was bigger than just their happiness. Back in town, Victoria sat in her empty penthouse, surrounded by acquisition reports and legal documents. Emma had refused to leave her side, camping out on the luxurious couch with her schoolbooks and fierce determination. "The forensics team found proof the emails were doctored," James reported, setting down another stack of papers. "But Netcore's legal team is dragging out the verification process." Victoria barely looked up. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, her usual impeccable appearance showing signs of strain. "And the board? Split. Some support you, but Grant's faction is pushing for a permanent leadership change. They're calling it a crisis of judgment." Emma slammed her science textbook shut. "This is stupid. Dad would never spy on anyone. He still won't even let me look at his Christmas shopping lists." Victoria's composed expression cracked slightly. She crossed to Emma, pulling her close. "I know, sweetheart, but your father, he thinks he's protecting us. By breaking our hearts, by sacrificing his own happiness to save everything else." Victoria's voice held a mixture of fury and love. "He's being noble and stupid and exactly the man we fell in love with." At the factory, Dave maintained Mike's workstation exactly as he'd left it, refusing to accept his resignation. The break-room coffee maker sat unused, no one daring to touch what had become a symbol of absent friendship. Mike's co-workers fielded reporters' questions with stony silence, loyalty running deeper than curiosity. In Martha's diner, the regular breakfast crowd kept an empty booth reserved, coffee cups turned upside down in quiet protest. Martha herself had thrown out a reporter who'd tried to bribe her for stories about Mike and Victoria's early days. "Love like that doesn't fake itself," she'd declared, adding the reporter's business card to her growing collection of rejected media requests. The days stretched into a week. Emma divided her time between Victoria's penthouse and their apartment, refusing to let either place feel abandoned. She kept Mike's old coffee maker clean and ready, despite Victoria's trembling lip whenever she saw it. "He'll come back," Emma insisted, though her voice held less certainty each day. "He has to." Victoria threw herself into gathering evidence, working through nights, driven by equal parts love and anger. "Your father thinks he's protecting my company," she told Emma during one late-night hot chocolate session. "He doesn't understand that none of it means anything without him." In the cabin, Mike maintained his self-imposed exile, turning away even Joe's attempts to talk sense into him. He spent hours staring at the returned engagement ring he couldn't bring himself to leave behind, remembering Victoria's words by the lake. "Love doesn't divide, it multiplies." Had he proven her wrong, or had he just been too afraid to trust that their love could withstand this storm? The answer came on a snowy morning, 10 days after his departure, a package arrived at the cabin, delivered by Joe himself, who refused to leave until Mike opened it. Inside was a familiar coffee mug from Martha's Diner, wrapped in Emma's science fair ribbon. Beneath it lay a handwritten note in Victoria's elegant script. "You once dove into freezing water to save me. Now you're drowning yourself to do the same. But here's what you forgot. I didn't ask to be saved that day. I asked to be loved. Come." "Oh, Mike, let me prove that love multiplies strength, not divides it. The coffee maker misses you. So do we." Mike traced the words, feeling the slight tremor in Victoria's usually perfect handwriting. Outside, fresh snow began to fall on Joe's truck, keys still in the ignition, waiting. The Cambridge Tech boardroom fell silent as Victoria strode in, Mike and Emma at her side. Theodore Grant's smug expression faltered at the sight of their united front. Behind them, James wheeled in a cart laden with documents and a familiar coffee maker. "Before we begin," Victoria announced, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had built an empire, "I'm having coffee with my family. Anyone care to join us?" She pulled out Mike's carefully maintained coffee maker, the same one from their apartment, and began brewing a pot right there on the mahogany conference table. The homey aroma of fresh coffee gradually replaced the sterile corporate air. "Ms. Cambridge," Grant began, "this is hardly the time for—" "Actually," Mike interrupted, speaking for the first time, "it's exactly the time." He set out a mix of elegant boardroom cups and chipped diner mugs. "You see, Mr. Grant, while I was hiding at that cabin, trying to protect everyone by staying away, I forgot something important about coffee." Emma, who had been quietly unpacking files from James's cart, looked up with a small smile, already knowing where this was going. "Coffee," Mike continued, "is about trust, about taking time to breathe, to think, to remember what matters. And while I was away, someone used that time to do some very interesting research." Victoria picked up the thread seamlessly. "Emma, would you like to explain what you found?" Emma stepped forward, her voice clear and confident. "I noticed something weird in the metadata of those fake emails. They all used military-grade encryption, the same kind that Cambridge Tech developed for the Peterson defense contract last year." Grant's face went pale. James began distributing copies of Emma's findings to the board members. "My daughter," Mike said proudly, "inherited her mother's attention to detail and Victoria's understanding of technology. She realized that only someone with direct access to Cambridge Tech's most secure projects could have created those forgeries." Victoria poured coffee for each board member. The domestic act somehow more intimidating than any corporate power play, which led us to investigate who had accessed the Peterson files in the last 6 months. Care to explain what your credentials were doing in those logs at 3 a.m., Theodore? Grant's attempt at composure crackled like thin ice. "You can't prove—" "Actually," James stepped forward, "we can. The SEC has been very interested in the evidence we've gathered, particularly the offshore accounts linking you to Netcore's shell companies." The boardroom erupted in chaos. Several members immediately distanced themselves from Grant, while others demanded immediate action. Through it all, Mike, Victoria, and Emma remained calm, drinking their coffee together like it was just another morning at home. Finally, Victoria raised her hand for silence. "I'm calling a vote. First, for the immediate removal of Theodore Grant from the board and a full investigation into his activities. Second, for the formal appointment of Michael Henderson as head of our new Ethics and Community Impact Division." Grant shot to his feet. "You can't be serious. Him? He's a factory worker." "He's the man," Victoria corrected coldly, "who taught me that true corporate responsibility isn't about profit margins or stock prices. It's about people, trust, integrity, everything you tried to destroy because you couldn't understand its value." The vote was unanimous, Grant's allies falling away like autumn leaves. As security arrived to escort him out, Emma couldn't resist a parting shot. "By the way, Mr. Grant, that coffee you just drank, Dad made it special for you, extra strong. to help you stay alert during your upcoming SEC interviews. After the dust settled, the remaining board members dispersed, leaving the family alone in the vast boardroom. Mike pulled Victoria into his arms, breathing in her familiar scent, mixed with coffee and victory. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have trusted our love was stronger than their lies." Victoria held him tighter. "Just promise me something. Anything. Next time you decide to protect me, remember that I fell in love with a man who jumps into frozen lakes, not one who runs away from storms." Emma hugged them both. "Also remember that I'm basically a genius who can expose corporate conspiracies, so maybe include me in the decision-making." They laughed together, the sound echoing off the boardroom's expensive walls. Outside, reporters were already gathering, hungry for details of Grant's downfall and the triumphant return of Cambridge Tech's CEO and her family. "Ready to face them?" Victoria asked, straightening Mike's tie. He smiled, thinking of how far they'd come from that morning at Lake Morrison. "As long as we do it together, though." He glanced at the coffee maker. "Maybe we should bring our secret weapon." "Dad?" Emma rolled her eyes affectionately. "I don't think the world is ready for your coffee." "No," Victoria agreed, kissing him softly. "That's just for us. Some kinds of magic you keep in the family." Spring came early to Lake Morrison that year. The ice that had brought Mike and Victoria together melted away, leaving waters that reflected new beginnings. On a sunny Saturday morning, their three worlds finally merged in the town square, where white chairs and fresh flowers transformed the restored bandstand into a wedding venue. Victoria stood in Martha's Diner's back office, her chosen bridal suite, while Emma helped adjust her dress. Elegant but simple, like the love it represented. Through the window she could see the crowd gathering. Cambridge Tech executives mingled with factory workers, corporate board members chatted with diner regulars, and reporters kept a respectful distance, honoring the town's protective circle around their favorite couple. "You look beautiful," Emma said, carefully arranging Victoria's veil. "Like a fairy tale, but better, because it's real." Martha burst in with coffee and Victoria's favorite chipped mug. "Something borrowed," she winked, pointing to the mug. "Though I suspect Mike's already got a new one waiting at home for you." Home. Their new house sat halfway between the lake and downtown, with a garden for Sarah's flowers, a state-of-the-art home office for Victoria's work, and a science lab in the basement for Emma's experiments. But more importantly, it had a kitchen, where three coffee makers sat in peaceful coexistence. Mike's old one, Victoria's expensive machine, and a new one they'd bought together. "Victoria?" Dave knocked gently. "Mike asked me to give you this before the ceremony." He handed her an envelope, containing a single coffee-stained note card. "Remember our first real morning together? You tried to impress me with expensive coffee, and I made you laugh with my ancient machine. That's when I knew we'd work, because you saw the value in simple things, and I learned that luxury isn't about price tags. It's about the heart you pour into each cup. Meet me at the bandstand. I'll be the one holding 2 cups of coffee, one bitter and one sweet, just like life. Like us. Love, Mike." Victoria clutched the note to her chest, tears threatening her careful makeup. Emma quickly dabbed her eyes with a tissue. "Dad's such a sap. But don't worry, I made sure he used the good coffee beans today." Outside, Mike stood beneath the flower-decorated bandstand, looking surprisingly comfortable in his tuxedo. As promised, he held 2 coffee cups. Dave stood beside him as best man, while James had insisted on coordinating the entire event with military precision. The wedding march began, not with traditional organ music, but with a recording of Lake Morrison's dawn chorus, "The Same Birds," that had witnessed their first meeting. Victoria appeared at the end of the aisle, and Mike's hands trembled so much that Dave had to rescue the coffee cups. Their vows were simple but profound. Mike spoke of second chances and the courage to love again, of Emma's wisdom and Sarah's enduring legacy. Victoria spoke of frozen lakes and warm hearts, of learning that true wealth lies in morning coffee and bedtime stories and the family you choose. Emma's maid of honor speech brought both laughter and tears. Some people think fairy tales are about magical transformations, about becoming something you're not. But my dad and Victoria taught me that real love is about becoming more of who you are. Dad's still the hardest worker I know, and Victoria's still changing the world with technology. They just do it better together. The reception was a beautiful chaos of worlds colliding. The factory crew taught corporate executives the electric slide. Board members sampled Martha's famous meatloaf alongside gourmet catering. Victoria's tech entrepreneurs talked innovation with local small business owners, while children played on the grass, unimpressed by net worth or social status. As evening fell, Mike and Victoria slipped away to their bench by Lake Morrison. She'd changed into a simpler dress, he'd loosened his bow tie, and they each held a fresh cup of coffee. Mrs. Henderson, Cambridge. Mike smiled, testing the new name. Mr. Henderson, Cambridge, Victoria replied, then laughed. That's going to confuse a lot of corporate letterheads. Good. He pulled her closer. Let them learn that love doesn't fit in neat business categories. From the reception, they could hear Emma giving impromptu science lessons to a mixed group of fascinated children and adults. The Sarah Henderson Memorial Fellowship had just announced its first class of medical students, and the Thomas Parker Initiative was expanding to schools nationwide. Their personal happiness had multiplied into opportunities for others, just as they'd hoped. You know, Victoria said softly, when I fell through this ice, I thought I was falling to my death. Instead, I was falling into my life, my real life. Mike touched his coffee cup to hers in a toast. To real life, with all its bitter and sweet moments. And to coffee, Victoria added with a smile that held all their tomorrows, which, like love, is always better when shared. 1 year later, Lake Morrison sparkled under a winter sun. A new bench sat near the spot where their story began, its plaque reading, "Where every ending is a beginning." On this particular morning, 3 cups of coffee steamed in the cold air, as Mike, Victoria, and Emma gathered for their special anniversary tradition. "It's from Harvard!" Emma's hands shook as she opened the thick envelope. The medical school early admission program. Mike and Victoria held each other's hands tightly as their daughter read. When Emma looked up, her eyes shining, no words were needed. The dream that had started with a little girl's science fair projects and a father's endless night shifts had come true. "The Sarah Henderson Fellowship Committee will be thrilled," Victoria said softly. Their first legacy recipient. Mike pulled Emma into a fierce hug. "Your mum would be so proud, kiddo. Both your mums." Victoria wiped happy tears as she added, "And just wait until you see the surprise in your lab tonight. The Cambridge Tech Medical Research Division has some new equipment that needs testing before release." Their lives had found a rhythm as natural as the lake's waves. Mike split his time between the factory floor, where he insisted on keeping his old position 2 days a week, and his new role, leading Cambridge Tech's community impact programs. Victoria had transformed her company's culture, proving that ethical business practices and personal values could drive innovation better than cutthroat corporate politics. Their house had become a hub where different worlds constantly intersected. Board meetings sometimes ended with Martha's meatloaf, while factory workers' children got coding lessons in the basement lab. The coffee maker collection had grown to include one in every room, a running joke about their family's foundation, being built on caffeine and love. "Look," Emma pointed across the lake, "someone's teaching their kid to ice skate." They watched the parent and child glide awkwardly across the frozen surface, remembering other beginnings on this same ice. Victoria squeezed Mike's hand. "Should we tell her now?" Mike nodded, smiling. "Emma, how would you feel about sharing your lab space when you're at Harvard? With who?" Victoria's free hand drifted to her stomach. "Your little brother or sister might need somewhere to do their homework in about 7 years. Emma's squeal of delight echoed across the lake, startling a flock of winter birds into flight. As she hugged them both, her acceptance letter crumpled between them. Mike looked at his expanded family with wonder. From this same spot, he had once dove into freezing water to save a stranger. Now that act of instinctive courage had multiplied into more love than he'd ever thought possible. "I guess life really is like coffee," he mused. "The best kind takes time, requires attention, and is made with love. And is perfect for sharing," Victoria added, her eyes bright with future mornings. "And keeps you awake for medical school?" Emma laughed. Together, they watched the sun rise higher over Lake Morrison, 3 cups of coffee growing cold, but their hearts staying warm. Sometimes the biggest dreams come true in the smallest towns, and sometimes the simplest things, like love and coffee and courage, can change everything. They had rewritten their own fairy tale, and this was their happily ever after. Not an ending at all, but an endless series of beautiful beginnings.